Uldor's cannons fired. A volley of heavy shot slammed into the ranks of advancing skeletons, reducing some to dust, and sending others reeling from the percussive shock tearing up the sand. A whisper came down from the sky. The skeletons broke into a sprint. In front of them was Uldor's shield wall, bristling with guns, and just waiting for a bone to enter effective range. Then there was a rumble. Story saw the source at once. "Uldor!" he shouted down the line, but Uldor was fussing over the configuration of the muskets at the far side of the formation. The rumble grew. The front ranks of the skeletons were suddenly bowled aside from the rear by a bounding creature, a huge construct of marble, bronze and gold. It looked like a centaur, combining the body of a cat with the torso and face of a man. It was the necro sphinx, towering and fast, standing 10 dawi tall, between huge sword arms just as long. "Uldor!" Story cried out again. Uldor looked up and saw the hulk bounding at the line. He dashed backwards as it struck the shield wall nearby. Dawi were cast high into the air, and the Sphinx's 2 chopping blades parted the line in a cloud of blood. "Khazran, do it then!" Uldor shouted from the ground. Further back, Khazran was shuffling along the rifle line, waving a purple crystal up and down. "Just a moment's delay is all it needs," he insisted, although Uldor was scrambling away and heard nothing of it. The legionaries at the front tried to chop at the Sphinx's feet. It was like striking solid stone. All it did was invite those gleaming blades to jab down from above. "Crompson, are we dead here or what?" Uldor demanded after getting back to the rifles. "Oh, I'm done waiting to find out. Fire it off then," Khazran called. The rifle dawi took aim and blasted out a volley at the Sphinx's twisting torso. The bullets burrowed inside, casting out plumes of shattered marble. The dawi picked themselves up. The recoil of the dark powder had rammed them over and broken a few rifles to boot. "That's the tool for the job, Lord. Just got to do it," Khazran said. The rifles were hurriedly reloaded as the Sphinx stumbled around, clearly put off balance by the holes in its chest. A second volley scarred it all over the face, so thoroughly that no features were left visible when it hurled its body forward in rage. It ploughed itself into the sand in front of Khazran and Uldor, then crumbled down into pieces, no longer bound by the Tomb King's animation. "Magic undoes magic, Lord, you see?" Khazran insisted. "Magic, or the impulse of a hot-fired bullet," Uldor said. "One gives you the other there. Lads, let's switch to the standard brew for the main course, or we'll split all the barrels before noon. I'll get you something better for next time. Or the Lord Engineer will, won't you, Lord?" Uldor waved Khazran away, then directed the reforming of the shield wall. The skeletons who approached were both less dexterous and strong than the beastmen, easily repulsed with pushes of the shield. Axes cut old bones like dry brush. Gunnery worked well too. They were a smaller target than a regular human, but with no soft tissue to take a hit, the impact of a rifle ball would simply shatter the bones. A hit to the spine would cut them in half, the limbs would explode in their joints, and hitting the skull would let out a satisfying clatter as segments flew into the surrounding skeletons like shrapnel. Some rode horses, some shot from afar with bow and arrow, and some attacked with curved blades and thin spears. A constant hail of shooting kept them in check. Yet the shield wall was broken a second time by another of the skeleton's many magic-born allies. A gang of black-blue beasts with dog heads of bone white pushed forward with gleaming Kopesh swords in each of their thin claws. These warrior idols were the ashabti, a mere 3 dawi high, but a few dozen in number. Their strength drove their blades right through shields and armor, or otherwise ploughed opponents aside. A full regiment of the Obsidian Legion was cut to pieces trying to contain these monsters, only for more to suddenly crawl from the sands behind the line, throwing off that sand with a shake of the head and dragging more blades from the endless battle debris below the desert. Their bounding strides made rifles useless, but for the odd chance that the barrel wouldn't let a sweeping sword snap right through it. Some dwarves dragged Uldor out of the area, while Story raced into the frenzy. One does not become a Thane of the Dawi without amassing powers beyond the rank and file. Story's axe cleaved through the thin marble ankles of the ashabti, then took their heads off neatly when they toppled over. Likewise, his Gromril shield sparked and sang at the slam of whirling kopeshes, not yielding to the dark-driven blows. Seeing 3, then 4 ashabti fall, the other Dawi rallied to keep opponents off his flanks while he worked. Behind them, Khazran finished another waving dance amid the battered rifles, then pointed out at the ashabti. A dark powder volley was unleashed, sundering 1/3 of the rifles at once, yet also tearing off the limbs and heads of the ashabti like they were made of wet parchment. Uldor had a go himself, hip-firing an infused blunderbuss right into the chest of a dog-god beast, turning it into a cloud of rocky fragments and tumbling pieces. With this assault seen off, the lines were reorganized to keep the pushing skeleton warriors at bay. Supported by undead vultures, bone horse riders, and refreshing pulses of channeled dark magic, the skeletons kept up their attack. The tide was to turn suddenly, though. Uldor spied amid the throngs a mummy with royal regalia. It was Tomb King Arahos. Uldor took careful aim with his favourite rifle. Another singed spot was added to his grey beard, and another hole was added to Arahos's grey face. That invisible vortex of dark magic sailing over the battlefield span itself out into nothing. The distraction of the necro sphinx, the ashabti, and now their Lich King cut the flow of dark energies behind every bony footprint the skeletons made. They slowed dramatically, becoming fodder to be cut down or amusing targets to be sniped. As the magic faded more still, the efforts of staying upright overwhelmed the warriors. The army of the Rakef dynasty fell, unmoving. The Dawi quickly split the bones apart and scattered them about. The weapons and armor were confiscated. Was that enough to truly defeat an army that cannot know death? It was a question that none could answer. It was enough, though, to see the fall of the pyramid complex and Arkan's Black Tower, the goal of their march. It appeared like nothing more than a series of stone monuments, dressed in words of lost languages, devoid of life larger than a speck of dust. Such was the difference a drought of magic made in these places of power. Perhaps it held value to Arkan, and the agreement had been to summon him at once to take claim of his historic fief. Uldor immediately had his legion marching home, planning to instead bring news of his triumph to Arkan in person. There was a brief thundering halt close to Atalan when they came upon the remnants of the beastman horde, back from their feast at Al-Haik to seek more carnage. They got it, and they didn't like it. After a long journey, they were direly in need of water and nourishment. Dawi blood would do, and the beasts came bounding up to claim it with no semblance of order. They were routinely blown away by volley after volley of accurate fire, each round prepared faster than the last. Khazran watched the weaponry with a designer's eye. He was trying to stop his dark powder from cracking the barrels with the force of its blast. With his hands gripping violet-hued runestones in his pockets, he came up with a few ideas amid the slaughterous hunt. Carrion birds from across the continent came for the feast, roasting at the legion's back. So did the current scourge of Araby meet a sudden end. Yet always there was more the Chaos Gods had to renew their torment. Time was all that had been bought. After just one night in Eye of the Panther, the Legion travelled south to the underway terminus at Vulture Mountain, then out to the coastal sands of Araby's southwest. There was a spring rich in life not far from the mountains, forming a thin belt of greenery snaking off to the ocean. Beside a large lake 2 days' march down this waterway was an enormous palace complex. There were pyramids, carved pillars, and tall, flat archways, the marks of the old kingdom. Yet also there were round-cornered halls and overgrown orchard terraces, the trappings of the Arabian mystics who had ruled the area before the pyramids decorating their estate had burst open with dreadful wails. This complex was home to Arkan the Black. He played a gracious host, coming out almost a mile beyond his furthest gate to greet Uldor.
"You would betray even the stone that houses you, you clutch of hapless mortal,"
Arkan complained when he realized this was no courtesy call. "That I might. It's not for the stone's sake that we work," Uldor said. "And you knew that your powers would affect us and treated with us all the same? We're like a spear shattering on your enemy's shield. Is it wrong to think we've been mistreated?"
"You would have become more powerful. Your bones are sturdy. Your will is bright, small and concealed in life. You would stride as the tallest, greatest warriors in undeath. You say you fight to survive. My gift, your salvation, brings me your insolence, your army. Our pact lies desecrated to serve your folly. Only chaos now draws profit from this spring of effervescent evil."
"I've heard such arguments already, Vizier of the Black Tower. I'll tell you what I told my own deviants. Preserving life doesn't mean preserving my life, nor yours. It means preserving how we live. It means preserving knowledge, passing down foundations to build upon. That is how we grow. Not growing old, but growing strong. Look at you, Grand Vizier after all this time. Nothing has changed. Nay, there's little to be built by simply collecting power. You have to pass it on to those with fresh eyes for it. That's where the good shines and the bad stinks. That's where the next step begins. Considering this, we're going to have to turn down your kind offer of being turned into your thralls. I'm afraid we're going to have to put an end to your magic here. You're welcome to leave."
"You sing the praises of death and the vorpal torture of chaos that awaits you below. So be it. So falls your realm. So ends your life,"
Arkan said with a desiccated spit. "My machines will carry on. Killing me won't kill the Dawi," Uldor called after the storming Tomb King. "I dare say we've angered him," Story commented as he came up to Uldor. "I still don't really understand all this," Khazran said, inviting a response that didn't come. Instead, Uldor pointed at the walls of the palace down the road ahead. "Get the cannons ranged, and the height triangulated for ladders. If you want to see this dark magic, Master Crompson, then I've good news. You're taking the gyrocopter into their den tonight. In the meantime, 300 blasting charges will do to seal those tombs. Make sure the lads get them done, eh?" Arkan had scarcely got his wobbly entourage back through his gates when the pounding of cannonballs rapped the towers dotted along the walls. Skeletons were mobilized from within the palace, lining the walls with longbows and spears. Looking out, they would have seen approaching some strange constructs. They weren't just facing dwarves, but dwarven engineers. 4 huge towers of palmwood, half rolled, half skied across the sands, pushed by chains of legionaries. They were fashioned after the ancestors of Atalan, stoically gripping their wooden axes as they approached the walls. The skeletons were not without recourse. Inside the towers punctuating the walls were large ballistae. They released meter-long bolts of metal that punched through the towers. 2 were splintered apart so thoroughly that they were useless by the time they were in position. 2 still served to ferry legionnaires quickly up to the walls, safe from arrows and thrown spears. The ballistae towers were silenced as their bricks were knocked away by the cannons. Several tumbled forwards, creating piles of rubble that acted as ramps to reach the wall top. Meanwhile, the light gunners had been practicing their shooting. It took some finesse to break open the skulls pointing up above the wall's ramparts. Alternatively, it took dense powder to blast the rampart right out of the way with a wide caliber bullet. Both methods were available to the well-trained and well-armed legionnaires. This shooting ended the threat of arrows from above, and so ladders were rushed forward to gain entry where the towers had failed. Story was first up them, stepping over the shattered skeletons littering the top. However, peering over the other side, he saw the avenues of the palace complex packed with undead warriors. They marched in tandem towards the walls. "Bring those guns up here! We've another gallery to clear yet!" he shouted down towards Uldor. Uldor came up himself with 200 fresh legionaries. Story was visible through the gaps in the bones of the skeletons surrounding him. "Axes to the front! Make space for some powder work," Uldor ordered. Battle was joined, disordered and frantic, far from the usual legion drill. It was too narrow a space to do anything fancy, yet there was plenty of space above. The gyrocopter swung down, with Khazran at the helm. He dropped his cargo of troops onto the roof of a colonnaded building beside the melee, leaving them to provide flanking fire on the skeleton advance. Then he took the copter right into the thick of the action, making a wild run along the wall, barely a span clear of it. The front of the machine had 2 whirring blades, drills forged onto the nose to give it some bite. The flying machine chewed up a length of skeletons, before the weight of the bones being ploughed forward almost crashed it entirely. Perhaps a rocket on the back too, Khazran thought to himself, pulling up and placing his hand on the lever for the clattergun. He sent bones below reeling with incendiary bursts, and kept empty eye sockets locked on his antics, further disorganizing the groggy undead. Story was rescued, if he needed it, and a section of the wall was secured. Then the gunners came forward to shoot down into the complex, quickly stemming the flow of reinforcements. More of the wall was pacified, and in fact the reinforcement flow seemed to dry up. Those left animate slowed and slowed until they ceased to march at all. Then their bones fell from their places, just as the Dawi had seen in battle with the Rakef. The dark magic of the palace had been wounded. Uldor and Story took a company of legionaries deeper inside to finish the job. Nothing was over until the arch-necromage Arkan was, figuratively, dead and buried. Beneath the largest of the pyramids was a market square. That was where Arkan waited. He was surrounded by first his royal necropolis knights. These were the elites of the ancient armies, riding upon giant ensorcelled cobras, their bronze bodies wrapped in twists of gold, and their scales edged with brilliant electrum. Second was a pack of dog-headed ashabti, twin swords crossed over their chests. When Uldor and Story rounded a corner and encountered this scene, the ashabti raced with lunging steps to clear them away. Uldor took the head off one with a quick blast of a blunderbuss, but its momentum carried the body on to smash him over. Story batted away blades with his shield, but more were always falling. It was a moment of sudden danger, resolved by a gift from above. "Don't resent me for this, Lord!" Khazran bellowed from the gyrocopter. He threw down a stone tied to a stick. It clunked onto the smooth sandstone pavement. After a moment of disappointment, the stone lit up, and the ashabti at once halted, then fell to the ground. The stone became dull again. "I'll explain later," Khazran added. He turned the gyrocopter and unsnaked a necropolis knight with a quick burst. By then, the legion escorting Uldor had set up a firing line beside their lord. The knights charged, but the wide necks of their cobras made easy targets. Shots smashed out of their backs, and the riders tumbled down to meet axe and pick. Story pushed through in time to see Arkan hobbling away behind the fray. An axe was lodged in his back from afar, slowing the hobble to a shuddering shuffle. Story arrived to reclaim his weapon.
"So, Chaos has won,"
Arkan wheezed. "Sorry, Vizier. It just wasn't going to work out between us," Story quipped. His axe took Arcan's head off, and with a fading whisper, the rule of that ancient king was over. He was one of many. Between this affront and the affair with King Arahos, the Dawi had roused the ire of hidden kingdoms all across Araby, and indeed beyond it. It was likely destined to be this way. The battle lines in the Skeleton Wars had been drawn.